Hi, Amanda here. Welcome to Unseen Hands Tarot. This is a reading today for Aries energy, speaking to Aries or through Aries energy to anybody that's resonating with Aries at this time, whenever you find this reading. So at the time that I'm doing this reading, Mars is a prominent figure in the sky, and Mars is the planet associated with Aries. Mars is square Pluto, and that aspect is coming in really strong with the image that I found for you today. So I came upon this image by tuning in to a live stream that I go to pretty often that live streams old, like mainly horror movies. And so I decided that when I tuned in randomly right before I did your reading, that whatever image was there could be the image that's speaking to you at this time. And I feel like the image is actually really Plutonian. So it's this image, I'll show you a clip in a moment, but it's this image of a woman walking. It's from this movie, I think it's like a 1972 or 73, Requiem for a Vampire. Okay, just to give you the idea of the world we're in here. And this person's walking away at a transitional time between night and day. I don't know if it's sunset or sunrise, but they're walking away from the camera through this graveyard, and there's just like these sounds of, birds sort of cawing in the distance. A cat is meowing, but it's mainly just silent as she walks away. And so there's already this tone present today that feels very much like this Mars square Pluto aspect. Pluto evoking the graveyard in that scene, evoking Pluto. And this frictional aspect of tension or sort of squaring up against these energies. Mars is a combative energy. It's sharp, it's intense, it's fast, it comes in hot. And Pluto is this much larger, powerful force that is underlying everything. This ruler of the realm of death and the underworld and decay, the graveyard. So there is this sort of emotional intensity to the aspect, and then seeing the emotional intensity of this scene, it does feel quite literally grave. Like there has been some sort of intense emotional process. So we're going to investigate this now by looking into the shape shift that's happening for Aries at this time. Okay, I'm actually going to use this card game, a memory game that I have of like famous photographs. I'm going to use this to look at your shape shift. Let's try to understand the shape that Aries is shifting out of at this time. Okay, interesting. I think it's just those two. So we got two very similar images. It's kind of funny because that movie Requiem for a Vampire showcases these two women that are friends / lovers on this adventure together, trying to escape all sorts of like hell. But they actually look very much alike to me, and one's blonde and one's brunette, and it always sort of creeped me out. But so here we are with some Cindy Sherman. So you have this portrait, it's a memory game after all, half of a portrait from Cindy Sherman. And Cindy Sherman's work is so much about like how one represents themselves and what it means to play with image, and how others see you versus how you see yourself. So there's this interesting like twinning vibe happening on both of these images. I'm not sure who took this photo. Let me look it up. Okay, this is Hannah Maynard, a photo from 1875, I think it said. And what's interesting about this photo is that it's playing with, this is the same person, just sort of like cut into the image. in different positions over time. So the photographer was playing with technology in this way that duplicated her activities over time into one image. So there's something here about like twinning or like duplication, or since the Cindy Sherman figures look like clowns to me, like even like mimicry, or there's something here about shifting out of, maybe there's some sort of like identifying of self in this like duplication. I'm not sure what this means. Maybe it'll become clear once we see the shape you're shifting into. Help us understand the shape that Aries is shifting into. Okay, there's more of this like walking away. Let me see who this photo is by. Okay, this is Joel Meyerowitz, 1975. A photo in New York City, and what's really interesting about this, there's this just repeated images. I'm just going to show you the full photographs. There's this theme of duplication or repetition, because we've got camel coats, 4 figures all in camel coats that seem to be sort of walking away from each other. Interesting too that this shadow imagery is present. So there's a sense of separation and walking away, since we, again, like that image from the film, from our vantage, these figures are walking away from us. Whereas in the other images, let me just show you. Yeah, great. So here's this is called At Home, Multiple Exposure. This is the Hannah Maynard, right? So here it is in its full glory. Again, 4 figures, all duplicated. And then to continue the creep fest here, we have Cindy Sherman. 4 figures, similarly duplicated. Let's see if there's anything else here. Okay, this seems to be, so I'm doing the shape that you are, let's just do one card for now. The shape you're shifting out of, the shape you're shifting into, and then what that shape shift looks and feels like. We've got this light bulb wired into the ceiling in a red room. Hello, Mars. Light bulb being a symbol of ideas or enlightenment, a flash of understanding that's leading to some sort of separation or walking away. It's interesting though, because in at least this half of the photo, we're seeing 2 people still connected. There is a sense of walking away from something, from some particular vantage point, but there is a connection that's still present between the camel coats. I want to see if there's anything else that wants to come out from this deck before we move on. Yeah, this feels important. So a turning away or a walking away. Interesting that there's this like coat, trench coat type or camel coat theme. And then we have this portrait of the child who is actually turning around and directly facing us. Something about the young self wanting to speak through here. And this feels so much to me about reaching a really perhaps intense, again, Mars energy, a really intense light bulb moment of understanding around your identity and around perhaps how your identity has been presenting. And there's a shift here that is a walking away, but it's also like a coming home to self and re-identifying with perhaps a younger version of you or like a child self. Something very innate to you that your child self never really forgot. I'm just seeing if I can find the full image for you. Yeah, this is oh gosh, forgive me for this pronunciation. Jean Mutasimi Ash, gosh, 1978. Here's the full portrait. So again, there's these figures in the background connecting, embracing. Most of them are not facing us, but this young one is, and it feels really reminiscent to me of this energy. Beautiful how the images are speaking here. This just creepy thread of duplication throughout this reading. And this light bulb moment. This is the only contrasting image in the entire thing. Something very different in energy and in theme. It just feels like the planet Mars just coming in and offering that energy and offering some form of new understanding of self. And isn't that interesting, Aries? Because the archetype of your zodiac sign, of this sign of Aries, is so much about the self. It's about this like initial realization of, oh, I am separate from the others. I am me, and I am different than these ones over here. That is that Aries Libra polarity and that axis. And interestingly, Mars is in Libra at the time that I'm doing this reading. So there is this tension, this opposition of sort of staring at, if Libra is relationships and the other, and Aries is the self, there's this like opposition, staring at each other from across the room, seeing each other perhaps quite clearly suddenly. And this is also right a couple days after an Aries full moon, the sun in Libra opposite the moon in Aries, having this moment of full light, full illumination, where they can see one another really clearly in perhaps a new way. And it's highly emotionally charged. And it's bringing up that tension, that line of pull between self and other, and how identity functions in that mix. Okay, I want to go to the Slow Holler Tarot now and see if we can get some tarot wisdom for us here to help illuminate this shapeshift and this story a little more. Aries, it's been a while. It's good to see you. It's good to feel into your energy. Okay, 9 of Stones on the bottom already. There's that Pluto and Capricorn energy, perhaps with the goat. Already this energy of self-illumination, standing on a foundation of independence and self-assurance. Okay, we'll take that somewhere. And it seems that like this is the illumination, because of the shining, these beams of light shining out from this goat. There is this, again, like light bulb moment energy or illumination of self. So I'm going to put that right under the light bulb. And let's see about the shape you're shifting out of. This shape that Aries is shifting out of, the duplication of self energy. Okay, a lot of cards just came out and I'm not sure. Yeah, well, the 8 of Cups is here, which is the energy that I feel from the film image that we are working with, of this person walking away through a graveyard in a transitional time between night and day, this like liminal emotional space where everything is silent and there's just this like sort of sad grief and emotional truth that is painful and involves loss that is present. And that's showing up here in the Eight of Cups. Interesting that we have the two eyes that are showing a polarity. There's an eclipse energy happening in the background. Again, transitional relationships between the sun and the moon. The sun, a symbol of identity and self and like outward expression of self. And the moon, a symbol of inner identity and inner experience of self, internal expression and emotions. So that is very much here. And it's almost like, again, at that Aries full moon, there's this like realization of self and others that somehow brings grief. And it brings this like just heavy emotional, I don't want to say release, because it just feels more like this sort of sustained, silent tension. It's like it's being held in me, and in that holding and in that pull, I feel like a very slow release. There's resistance to that release. It's something that feels difficult to let go of fully. The Two of Wands, the Four of Knives. I mean, we have this like rumination energy. You know, this person is sleeping with a knife under their pillow and dreaming of knives opening and closing. So there's this like, to me, this is a card of mental processing where you're just like, you know, like thinking about something, unconsciously processing it in your sleep, maybe not sleeping very well, but like seriously needing some rest from whatever you've been thinking about and whatever has been grieving you and weighing on you emotionally. And the Two of Wands talks about, you know, it is to me, again, another Aries type energy of typically, traditionally in the tarot, it's walking through this doorway and seeing and acting towards a bold new direction. But in this card, it looks like grief to me. It is the rib cage covering the lungs. There's these like sort of dead looking branches all entangled through the skeleton, the bones. It feels like grief. It's difficult to breathe in this energy. Interesting, the cards ended up like this on top of one another. I'm going to show it to you close up so that you can see that there's this, they're sort of feeding into one another. There's a pull between them where the grief seems very difficult to release and very difficult to let go of. It's almost magnetic or like electric, this electric current of grief is, that circuit is really strong, and it's creating this sort of mental environment where it may be difficult to find rest and ease in the mind. And then the Queen of Swords, the Visionary of Knives, seems to be coming through again with this Mars energy, where it's almost like Mars is coming in and cutting through that. Mars is sort of coming in and going, okay, enough, you know, like let's cut through. This is just the kind of sharp mental energy that is needed to cut through that grief circuit. Interesting, grief circuit. I don't know that those words have ever come, like I've never put those together before. And then it's interesting that we do have this like energy of duplication, because it's almost like there's a doubling up of the grief coming from two opposite ends. Again, that's that full moon energy it's a cloud, but if you hold it from a distance, it looks like the full moon. This sort of pull between the sun and the moon in opposition to one another. I'm wondering, y'all, like, whenever you're finding this reading, you know, what is in your own chart, if you are interested in astrology or speak this language, if you look at Libra and Aries, you know, what planets are in Aries, what planets are in Libra, what houses are there, how do they oppose one another, how do they communicate with each other, what would an Aries full moon, a sun in Libra opposite the moon in Aries, what would that mean to you, or what did it mean to you in October 2021? Because there's something coming through and trying to cut that grief attachment or that intense grief connection, trying to cut that with some sort of self-realization. You know, I love this red flower on the head of the owl because it's higher wisdom. You know, the Queen of Swords comes in when it's time to cut the crap. You know, it's like, okay, that's enough. I'm drawing a line. You know, I'm coming in with higher wisdom and a sharp blade attached to it. And that is going to delineate something clearly and cut some sort of, again, I just feel it as like cutting this ongoing grief circuit. Just like cut the wire, and the circuit is this circuit that was very powerfully energetically connected goes, and there's the movie clip. There's the line of tension has been severed, and there is a release. There is a silent, quiet walking away into the distance. You know, it's like the heaviness, the emotional heaviness and intensity is still there. It is in a graveyard after all, but at least there's movement. At least there is a sense that something can transition now, because again, that movie clip was in a transitional time between day and night. Wow, this reading's cool. And probably painful. So, you know, if this is resonating with you and you've been experiencing that tension, I'm sorry, because it feels hard. Okay, but out of it comes this like standing on your own 2 feet and standing on your own solid ground type energy. Maybe part of the light bulb that's coming on here as the Queen of Swords, whatever this is, this energy that comes in and sort of breaks it up, you know, like maybe it's an outside force, maybe it's just a realization you're having inside of yourself, but something is coming in and sort of like turning on the lights, you know. It's almost like when you're in your room at night and you're having this like fear response because it's all dark and you can't see anything, and it's like if you could just turn on the lights, but you're too scared to leave your bed type energy. Again, like I'm speaking to the child that very much is alive within all of us. Okay, the kid that's like afraid to leave their bed and turn on the lights, but they knew if they did turn on the lights, all the scaries would go away. But it's like, I can't put my foot down in front of my bed, or that thing under the bed, Pluto, is gonna grab it. And so I'm just stuck in this tension moment, scared. And then something comes in and turns on the lights. And it's like, oh, I'm safe in myself. Oh, I can stand on my own ground. Oh, this is solid, safe ground that I am standing on. Got it. What else is this light bulb moment offering? This red room. It's almost like interesting when you're in a dark room, because if I look at this a little bit closer, perhaps this, I think the light bulb is maybe on. Interesting that it's got all of these different plugs plugged into this one light bulb, all of these attachments into this one idea or this one narrative. But what if for a second we imagine that in this image the light bulb is actually off, or it's been changed to a red light like you would use in a dark room to develop pictures. And it's interesting that we're using photographs here. So it's like under the red light, it is actually safe to allow the images to develop without getting overexposed. And it's a process that takes a certain chemical reaction and a little bit of time for that to happen. Here's the full image. This is William Eggleston. An untitled image, 1973. So again, we're playing with light and dark and the conditions that are needed to allow something to develop into a clear image. Allow the image, your self-image maybe, to develop into something clear or clarified. Okay, these images that came out are interesting. The Navigator came out in reverse, which we'll see about, and the Eight of Stones. The Navigator is the Emperor. This is associated with Aries energy, traditionally. So the Navigator is trying to steer the ship. And since it came out in reverse, there has to be some, I'm going to take it as something important because I sense an energy about it. And it's like, here you are trying, it's like you're trying to steer the ship without having a clear map, or like without having, it's not really about a map. It's more about your sense of self. Like that's what this reading is really talking about here, is there's some sort of illumination between the light by which you are navigating. And it's interesting that we've got the 8 to the 9 of stones. What are you building here? Like, how are you stacking your stones? Because that's the same question as how are you navigating? You know, how are you stacking the stones on which you can stand? How are you stacking your foundation? Are you stacking it by your own image? It's funny, like in your own image, creating something in your own image versus creating something that's sort of like, again, this imagery of duplication. And then Mars comes in to remind you who you are, and maybe in a pretty intense way. And that may even change, and it's even interesting the way these red lines are here, these red dotted lines that are like harsh, could be like harsh astrological aspects. It's like something is coming in to show you something very clearly and starkly and maybe a little harshly, and it might even feel a little harsh the way it's coming through. Because again, this Queen of Swords is cutting. You know, the Queen of Swords can be harsh, can be a bit stark in the communication and in the energy. It's like blunt, you know, like, okay, well, you asked for my opinion, so let me be blunt. Or maybe you didn't ask for my opinion and I'm going to be blunt anyway. That's the vibe here. And this reorientation as the image of yourself, I just keep seeing this, like, especially with Cindy Sherman doing these self-portraits and experimenting with identity. There's something about being in the dark room, which is sort of like a laboratory, almost like developing yourself. Well, that seems obvious now that I say it. This is about self-development, a time of just, it's almost like give yourself time to develop yourself. In the wake of some sort of grief or like separation. It's almost like after a breakup, and maybe that's something you're experiencing. There's like this awful sense of something having been ripped out of you, and you have this task now, this thing to navigate, which is navigating the world as a solo entity again. Yeah. There's the vulture, there's death. You know, okay, who am I without this person? Who am I when I walk through the world on my own 2 feet? Do I have a solid foundation to stand on in myself? Do I even know what direction to go in now that it's just me? And so there's this really interesting energy of like giving yourself the time to be in the dark room. Giving yourself this dark room experience of allowing the images to develop, allowing yourself the time and the right chemicals that you need to develop. You know, if you turn on the light too soon, you ruin everything. That's what it is. It's like when you're ready to, you just want these pictures to be done, developing. And so you turn on the light and guess what you've done? Overexposed. And now the images are wiped, you know? Interesting, overexposure. It's tender, this dark room energy of self-development. It's really tender and delicate, which is why it needs to be in the dark room. Oh, interesting, this dark room energy since we started with Requiem for a Vampire, you know, vampires need to shy away from the light. Okay, let's look at the shape you're shifting into, these camel coats. Okay, Student of Stones, 1 step at a time. I just see this as like, okay, let's, this is beautiful. So you're trying to lay the stones. You're trying to pick the stones that are right for you to stand on. Because again, this is about the 9 of Pentacles, your personal stability, security, foundation, and self-empowerment. And so you're trying to find the stones, choosing the stones that are right for you to stand on, not necessarily we, you know, like this is I versus we territory here. Like this isn't the stones that are good for us. These are the stones that are good for me right now, because again, you're still developing your sense of self, or a new sense of self is beginning to develop and emerge. And so the Student of Stones, it's like you are learning beautiful Plutonian energy here, taking a bite of the pomegranate in the underworld. Yes, it's good. You are learning how to choose your stones to stand on and your stones to build with. Again, Mars. There's something so hot about this actually to me. So it's almost like whatever this energy is that comes in and breaks up this grief circuit that you've been experiencing or are experiencing. And again, I'm seeing it as also sort of coming in and separating these two senses of self, whatever this duplicate identity thing is for you. It's like coming in and separating that and bringing in the first introduction of this red Mars energy. And then from then on, it's Mars and it's Mars. You know, it's like, okay, you are taking action now, Mars, a planet of action and momentum and ambition and drive. But the Student of Stones, to me, remember that, yes, there's a lot of fire here. It's beautiful for you. And also this is stones. So this is practical, laying practical foundations. And it feels like a slow energy to me. It feels like one stone at a time. like choosing the stones very wisely is what it feels like to me. Coming off fresh from this revelation. You know, you ate of the pomegranate in the dark room. Okay. And now if you are resurfacing, which I'm not sure that you are yet, you are, but whatever this is, it's about you choosing the stones very wisely and very personally. And there's something very important about you being separate because it has nothing to do with anyone else. And it needs to have nothing to do with anyone else right now. Or maybe again, with this like breakup energy I was feeling, maybe it's just that it needs to have nothing to do with a particular person or a particular association of your identity. Yeah, separation for sure. Maybe you don't want to, you know, like maybe there's something really emotionally heavy for you in like, this is just another image to me of going into the dark room, like going into the dark room and closing the door behind and everybody else is up at the surface doing their thing together. And you just seem to be needing, you're heavier right now, you know, like just going back to the emotional quality of that film clip from the beginning. It's just the reality, Aries, that you're heavier right now. And that's okay. Like your emotional energy is making it so that it's not easy for you to be up here with everybody else because your work maybe is down here. And actually, if we look down here, maybe there's something for you to collect at the bottom of the ocean. You know, maybe you have to let yourself sink a bit in order to find what you need to find. If we put these together, it's almost like you allow the heaviness of what you are feeling to separate you temporarily so that you can find the stones that are right for you to begin to rebuild. Three of Wands in reverse tells me it's not time yet. You know, it's like, it's just, Three of Wands is typically this energy of visioning forward into the future and like standing up on the high point, up on the top of the mountain, up on the precipice where you can get the wider view and see the larger trajectory of where you might go and what your next moves might end up being. And maybe it's just not time right now. You know, it's like, it's a bummer. And I feel that. I feel the bummer. And again, we are looking at a part of this reading that is walking away. But in the walking away from something else, interesting, I was just about to say you're turning towards yourself. And then we get this Architect of Vessels, which feels to me like an internal revelation of your magic. Again, very Mars, very red, these like witch hands coming in, you know, and like conjuring up this potency, because it's almost like a potion, conjuring up a certain internal potency that you can actually work with. Yeah, death. Absolutely. This is totally a death. This whole reading is a death process and a grief process and a transformation that is not easy, but is eventually leading you to yourself. And right now, where you discover your potency is in the dark room, whatever that means for you. It is in a space where you can allow yourself to develop in secret and allow yourself to develop without any other influences. So that you can see the photograph of you and yourself begin to appear. And this Three of Wands is, again, it's a bummer to tell you this, but it does feel like, and even as that image begins to emerge, don't rush it forward into the light of day until it has fully developed, or you will overexpose it. You will wipe it. You know, this is a sun in the background, and that sun is big. I get it, Aries. Your sense of self is important to you, obviously, and it is quite large. It's a large Mars energy, and that's really wonderful, but Mars can sometimes push. And there's something here that is really important about stay. Requiem for a Vampire, you know? Stay in the dark room and allow, so that you don't burn in the harsh intensity of that light before it's fully developed. The photograph is not developed enough to go out into the daylight and be seen. I mean, even the Student of Stones, yes, is discovering the stones that come from you and that are part of what you are laying as your foundation of self, but you're still in the underworld, pomegranate. You know, you're just grabbing seeds at this point and placing them into arrangements that reflect you. And there is grief in that process, and feelings of isolation and separation. But there's magic here, and I know that you don't want to miss that. There's potency and such richness to be found in this space. Okay. That feels clear to me. That is a complete reading. Maybe we'll just give you some flowers. Flowers for Aries in the dark room. Wow. Okay, it's clematis. And this is the Six of Wands, the Six of Fire. And from the Botanical Tarot here, Kevin J. Stanton writes, a much needed respite, a temporary break, a chance to connect with friends. Underneath of it, it talks about almost like the polarity, or like the reversal feeling of this being a false sense of being cornered, like a cornered animal. Interesting. I think that's all we need to know about this, except for it being a lattice, because a clematis is a climber, you know, it's a climbing flower. Clematises, by the way, are wild. Their blooms are massive and quite sinister looking. I really favor them. But they're a climbing vine and they need to climb. And it's interesting that the author of this deck is talking about this as like a respite and a break, and also a time to connect with friends, because we have the tension there between you needing a respite and a break, and also in that feeling really isolated and separated maybe from your connections with your friends. But again, I'm really feeling like you being in the dark room is really important right now, and connecting with friends may be a part of that. But if that is happening, it has to be with relationships that aren't triggering this for you. Whatever this trigger is and whatever energy this is in your life, it's like the relationships that would be fruitful for you to connect with at this time are a very different kind of support. And then there is this sense of reemergence with the Six of Wands. There is a sense that after the dark room, you do get to bring your photos into the light and say, hey guys, look what I made, or look at this image of me, this photo that I took. What do you think? You know, and then everybody gets to be like, oh wow, interesting. I really love that. It feels like you because blah, 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 blah. And now you're back in this sort of community camaraderie energy, but not until this becomes clear. Yeah. Okay. Aries, thank you for joining me here in this reading. I hope it was resonant and helpful for you. If it was, and you're feeling like you'd like to go deeper into a more specific reading that is just for you, please do book a personal reading with me. I would love to connect with you. I do readings over Zoom or pre-recorded, so you can choose whatever feels most comfortable to you. I'll leave the details in the description box and at the end of this video reading so that you can have access to a way to work with me personally. All right, friends, take care.